Hello and welcome to Diary of a Trader. Today we're going to go over planetary aspects, or the angular relationship of two planets and their kind of where they are in space, literally in space, how they align and what their relevance is to financial markets. Now, this is part of what's known as financial astrology, and financial astrology is just mathematical psychology based on astronomy. And so what we're going to do is we're going to open up a new chart, new candlestick chart. We'll do it of the euro dollar forex pair. And next we need to open up our planetary aspects. Now, when we apply an aspect, there's a near limitless amount of planetary aspects that we can have. It defaults right now to Mercury and Venus, and the degree is sextile, which means it's in periods of 60-degree measurements. If we want to see this from a more kind of a graphical view, we see that this is an ephemeris of our solar system. So here's Earth, the Sun, Mercury. You can see all the planets here. And all we're looking for are conditions to be met that the planets are of some type of degree and aspect to one another. So right now, if I were to mouse over here, this is the Sun and Neptune are squared. So they're about 90 degrees from each other. And Neptune and Mercury are squared. They're within 90 degrees. Or we can see Pluto and Venus, they're in opposition, which means that they are across from one another. They are 180 degrees from one another. Or Jupiter and the Moon, they're trine. Trine is 120 degrees. And so we can see that these change frequently as we go throughout a day and a year. These will change. What we're looking for is, how do these aspects play a role in trading? Well, there is a lot of material written about different planetary aspects and what happens when certain aspects show up. But each chart and each instrument is going to have its own kind of aspects that seem to generate a lot of price activity. And we're going to see that a lot when we use the slower planets like Jupiter, Saturn, and Uranus. And most of the slower planets are really where you're going to find most of the kind of signal generation. In fact, instead of Mercury, I'm just going to do Mars and Uranus. And then the aspects that we want to look for where we find a lot of market turns. Again, this is going to take a lot of trial and error and a lot of research on the analyst's part, but we do know that from research of other analysts that we know that the degrees of the square, opposition, and conjunction, these are all types of aspects that have high probabilities of generating some type of market activity. And so if we scroll all the way back, we can see that here is we'll do the orb overall views so we can get a clear view here. And so this is a Mars in opposition to Uranus. And then we have Mars squared Uranus. And we can see as we scroll around, are there some types of market tops or bottoms that show up before or after or around the presence of these aspects? You can see, sure, there's some. It would be hard to make a trade off this, so we kind of have to look at it a little differently. Now, Mars, William Delbert Gann talked about Mars being the trigger planet. Like it was the planet that caused moves and causes the generation of activity. So sometimes, depending on the chart, we want to look at some other planets and aspects. So this is Mars and Saturn. So Mars in conjunction with Saturn, that showed up prior to this high where we had this deep drive in the pound or the euro dollar. And that happened again back here in 2016 in August. If we scroll back, well, that happened again back again in August of 2014. And it was right before a rise in August of 2012. And so what we're really seeing here as we scroll back is that we have much more data showing that the Mars conjunction Saturn aspect seems to appear and cause drives down in prices. Were there any others that stuck out that would maybe signal some bullish activity? Not really seeing any off the top of my head here. But certainly the Mars or Saturn square Mars, Mars square Saturn, certainly when that shows up, we seem to see some similar activity generated. Let's look at some other planets here, and then we'll take a look at like one more equity as well. So this is Mars in conjunction, squared, and in opposition with Jupiter. And let's look to see if we have any historical patterns here that we want to see. So let's see. This was Mars opposition to Jupiter. That caused some lowering of prices. Excuse me. Happened here as well. We had a right on a market top here. Yeah, there is definite power behind the Mars-Jupiter aspects. Now, one thing that we can do to help us, anticipate a probable trade idea is that we could look at our moon phases as well. Okay, so if you remember, if you watched the video on our moon phases, if we put on our moon phases, we just want to see the full moon and new moons. Generally, if we see moon phases along with the aspects, we see that there are some high probability trades that we get. So there was a new moon that shows up in the euro, or a full moon rather. Full moons in the euro generally mean that we have some conditions for rising prices. That showed up right as we had an aspect here. Then we had a new moon. New moons are indicative of market highs in the euro dollar. A new moon shows up right near the time that we would have what was that? Mars in opposition to Jupiter. Kind of close there. Right here again we have a market top where there's a new moon and Mars in conjunction with Jupiter. Really not a great signal there. Not there. Another market high where we have a new moon with Mars square Jupiter. We got some rising in prices and we had a full moon and a Mars-Jupiter aspect. We were near market high here. So yes, this is a good type of pattern to look at. Full moon, indicating that we would have rising prices moving forward. That's what we have. We had a new moon indicating lower prices. And this kind of goes back and forth. So certainly what this is telling us is that we are almost getting, we're getting very, very strong signals, high probabilities, like in the 90 percentile, where when we have new moons, which new moons in the euro dollar usually indicate that we're at some type of swing high. When those show up along with a Mars-Jupiter aspect, they seem to respond according to how they would trade. So Mars-Jupiter aspects with new moons seem to indicate a trending down market. That didn't happen here. That didn't happen here. But we had a rising market here. If we go back, high market down. Did not happen here. Did happen. Yes, did happen. Did happen. Getting a lot of strong signals on that. And that is how you can apply aspects to various different markets and even on shorter time frames. Venus is sometimes used as a trigger planet as well. If we were to go with Mars and Venus, we would see a lot more signals that would pop up in our charts. And sometimes it's harder to trade off the faster time after the faster aspects. But certainly they do show trade possibilities. In fact, if we go to Mars and maybe Jupiter, we would see some faster signals. All right. Again, this takes a little bit of practice with your and making notes, writing down notes. We're saying, well, where was the market high, and was there an aspect, and then you would just make a little note saying, well, there was a swing high with a full moon, and there was a Jupiter square Venus, or there was a market high prior to a large down move, like right here, where Venus was opposed to Jupiter, and there was a new moon, which indicates some type of market high, and then we had a drive down. So when we're looking at this, we see, well, we just want to take notes of these aspects and then what their behavior was before and after they showed up. And not all aspects are going to be showing turns in markets. Because we're looking at negative aspects right now, but we can look at positive aspects like sextile and trine, and oftentimes these are bullish signals in some markets. In some currency markets they are. Okay. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to talking with you on our further videos when we're completing our studies on the basics of financial astrology and how to implement that in your trading. Thank you.